it's about choosing strength and at the right time. Siddharth and Shubhamoy, many thanks for taking out the time. Ambassador, take a look at this breaking development that we are tracking for all our viewers. This U.S. Supreme Court has struck down on the Trump tariffs. We were just talking about the Trump, the tariff tirade. What happens to the Russian oil? What happens with the Pax Silica? What do you make of this? U.S. Supreme Court striking down Donald Trump's tariffs. Your opening submissions on that front.
Look, it was expected because the remarks of the US Supreme Court during the hearings had clearly indicated that they were of the view that Trump had exceeded his authority under the Emergency Economic Powers Act. Now, the US has other instruments which it can use to impose tariffs, Section 301, Section 232, and so on. But all these require investigation, and they have limits of the tariffs which can be imposed, and also sometimes they have time limits for which the tariffs can be imposed. So let's wait and see how the Trump administration responds. But clearly this is a judgment which is in favor of the US constitutional rule and legal framework, which Trump had exceeded in terms of using executive authority.
Ambassador, what are Donald Trump's options at the moment? The Supreme Court has struck down on those tariffs. You have Secretary Scott Bessent, other administrative officials that are saying that they will invoke other legal justifications to retain as many Trump tariffs as possible. And if not, will these tariffs now cease to exist?
Well, there are two things which could happen. One is that, the US imposes similar tariffs under Section 301 for unfair trade practices by other countries. As I said, there has to be an investigation under that. Secondly, it can impose it on national security grounds under 232. So there are instruments which the US has under which it can impose tariffs on its trade partners, but they will not be so broad-based. They will be more limited. Or Trump can go to the Congress and say, you pass the legislation to impose these tariffs, because tariff imposition and financial powers are actually with the Congress, not with the president. So if the Congress passes legislation, then the tariffs become legal. So he has a range of options. How much he will bring them into play and in what manner, I think we have to wait and see.
Ambassador, the lower courts also ruled that Donald Trump exceeded his authority. The Supreme Court has also ruled that they've ruled essentially against President Trump's tariffs. If he goes to the Congress, he'll first have to convince the Congress that these tariffs have actually made the United States stronger financially. That's number one. And till the time that happens, because Donald Trump has hit nearly every foreign trading partner with some sort of tariff or the other. So what happens to these tariffs? Are they going to be put in abeyance? Could you help the viewers with some more clarity on that front?
Well, at the moment, till some other authority is invoked, they will be in abeyance. Because of the Supreme Court judgment, the tariffs will no longer apply until the US chooses to actually impose tariffs under some other section of the Trade Act. And in case that is not challenged, or it can be challenged, it can face legal challenge again. So it also depends on the judgment. Have they held the tariffs to be illegal, or have they held Trump has exceeded his authority under the National Economic Emergency Powers Act, in which case it leaves him open to use some other legal provision to impose tariffs. So it depends on the judgment, which I haven't seen.
Quite sure, and needless to say that hectic parlays right now at the White House, and Scott Bessent and team must be, rummaging through all the paperwork to understand what they can, actually and legally invoke at the moment. But in terms of that congressional, compliance, that challenge, how big of a challenge will that actually be, Ambassador? Trump pointing to clear congressional authorization, will he be able to get it? Numbers do stack a little bit in his favor, but this is an uphill battle for the Trump administration now.
It gives a chance for different countries to present their points of view. And Congress, even though the Republicans have a majority both in the Senate and the House, it will take time. And, if the midterms are coming near, which will be the case in November, then everybody will be looking at how this whole process will impact the midterm elections, which at the moment the Republicans look like they could lose the lower house of the Congress. So it won't be something which will be a cakewalk for Trump. But yes, he has the numbers in both the Senate and the House of Representatives in terms of a Republican majority. And till now, the Republican Party has really not crossed swords with Trump. They have generally gone along with whatever he has wanted to do. But after this, they may also hesitate.
Ambassador, Trump's administration has not provided tariff collection data since December 14th last year, 2025. But, there are various institutions that have given out an estimate. That estimate stands at more than $175 billion. So on the P&L sheet, certainly, things are going haywire. And you're of the opinion that until something else is invoked, all of this is going to be in abeyance. So not a lot of options in front of Donald Trump at the moment, and a big impact of the United States Supreme Court's anti-Trump tariff verdict on India as well. Let's talk about what's going to happen on India, ma'am.
So it will be part of what the US does with, trying to use other provisions of law to pass similar tariffs. But as I said, most of those, like 301, which is invoked for unfair trade practices by other partners, or, national security. These all have, certain procedures. You have to investigate, then a conclusion has to be presented. Then, you have to look at what is the band within which tariffs can be imposed. So it's not something which can be done in by executive order immediately.
There is one other option that people are talking about. It's including a statutory provision that permits tariffs on imported goods that threaten U.S. national security, and
Yeah.
another that allows retaliatory actions against actions, including tariffs against trading partners that the Office of the United States Trade Representative determines have used unfair trade practices. But that's not helping out Donald Trump anytime soon, is it?
Yeah, that's what I said. One is Section 301 is the one which gives the U.S. Trade Representative authority to investigate unfair trade practices and to impose tariffs on partners deemed to be trading unfairly with the U.S. And the second is this 232, where the US can invoke national security. That does give broader authority to the executive. But I don't see, large scale executive authority being deployed. Then the second question will be, the return or restitution for the tariffs which have been charged. And US companies may go to court to seek return of the tariffs which have been paid so far. But uh, again, this is something where legal opinion will be voiced after due process by courts. The government has not taken a view.